Hi, this is Phil Shapiro here in the Washington, D.C. area, and I am talking with my friend and Linux buddy, Don Watkins. He's in Western New York, and we recently found out that we have something in common about how we came to Linux. In the early 2000s, both of us became interested in something called the Linux Terminal Server Project, LTSP. And I'd like to hear Don's story, and then I'm going to share my story about LTSP. Don, tell me about LTSP from your side.
Okay, thanks. I started experimenting with Linux in the late 90s and gradually built servers and other things. I heard about this Linux Terminal Server project because I was part of a Red Hat listserv and for educators, and then I found some computers that were in our closets at school that were not being used. So I downloaded the distribution. There was a special K12 LTSP that incorporated both LTSP and Red Hat software, and I installed it and on a server, which was really not much of a server. It was just something that was left over in a closet. And then I bought some special LTSP boards from a place in Michigan, I believe at the time, and hooked them. They were little Ethernet cards, specially built that did TFTP back to this server. And I got it running, and I showed our Computer Technology Advisory Committee at the time, and our high school principal at the time was really, really interested because we had a particular place to use this. We had an ill-supervised computer lab where the kids were, stealing mice and doing things that children do from time to time. And so he wanted to see if we could use this in that setting. So that's exactly what we did. We set up a server that had 4 gigs of RAM because we were using, at that point, LTSP was 32-bit, so that was the limit in terms of memory. And 5 or 6 of these workstations that were old, repurposed computers that were probably like Pentium 200 MMXs or something like that. They really were, by today's standards, very low-powered machines. And they connected in their own subnet to this LTSP server, which was also had a laser printer hanging off of it. And the kids loved it because they could customize the Linux terminal server, their particular desktop. They could do the things that they wanted to do that we really had kept them from doing because we had software on Windows machines. Fortress was one of those things that limited how much they could customize their desktop. So they loved that. The principal loved it because it took care of a management issue for him. And, there was almost no cost involved other than our time and effort. So that was the beginning. And from there, we expanded.
So that's so interesting. It was both a practical solution and it was sound stewardship of resources. So it's you hear that, often with Linux, people get attracted for different reasons. But especially in this pandemic, it makes sense to look for how do you get the most use out of older materials that somebody might think is obsolete, but it's not obsolete. It just hasn't been used properly or soundly. So here's my LTSP story. I was working in the Arlington Public Schools in the early 2000s, and a mentor of mine, Jeffrey Elkner, he was setting up computer labs, computer centers in the basement of housing in South Arlington, and bringing technology access to a lot of immigrant families that didn't have internet in their apartment. So Jeffrey Elkner and his high school students, he teaches high school Python programming, they would set up a computer room. They would ask the management of the property, give us a room and we'll bring you the computers if you give us the room and the bandwidth and the internet, we'll set up a computer lab and we'll maintain it for free. So using donated computers, they set up these computer labs with LTSP, Linux Terminal Server Project. And I went by there to visit and to do some volunteering. And it was so encouraging for me to see this technology access using refurbished computers, and also having the students involved with doing tech support. So that brought service learning into the picture. And whenever you have service learning in Linux, you end up with some very positive results for the community. I've seen that in other towns and other school districts. Service learning and open source software, it's like peanut butter and jelly. They, as long as you don't have a peanut allergy, it's really delicious together. Now, Don, I also wanted to hear talking about stewardship. You had a very interesting story you were telling me about the Koha library card catalog kind of software in your neck of the woods. What's your story on that?
Yeah, well, I heard about, I wrote an article about Bywater Solutions about almost 5 years ago for opensource.com. And through that, I got to meet the CEO of Bywater Solutions and become familiar with Koha. In the intervening time, in the next year or two, our library system was going to switch from a proprietary operating system, or we sent out an RFP. We were considering other proprietary operating systems other than the one that we used, and we also considered two open source solutions, Evergreen and Koha. And I was on the committee that evaluated the software, and so we actually, one of the RFPs was from Bywater Solutions using Koha, and their presentation outshone all the other vendors, and it resulted eventually in them winning the bid. We went with Bywater Solutions and Koha, and it saved our library system about $50,000, $50,000 to $60,000
per year. Per year. Wow.
Per year, after the initial transition costs were factored in. So, and now what's really great about that is that in this pandemic, our library system can be managed from virtually any place. You don't have to be sitting in front of a Windows computer or a Mac or whatever with a special piece of client server software on it. You can manage the system from any computer that's using Firefox. They recommend Firefox, but you could certainly use Chrome or Chromebook. I use Chrome from my home, and it works fine. So almost any browser that is supported. Although, like I said, they recommend Firefox. The vendor does. So yeah, it's a great solution. And initially there was some pushback from some of the system librarians. But now that this is, we're nearing the end of year number 2, that's no longer the case. People are happy with the choice, and certainly it's saved the library system and the taxpayers thousands of dollars.
Yeah. Do you know what's really quite interesting with this open source is that there is no central marketing budget for open source. So with companies who have solutions, software solutions, they have marketing budgets. So if communities are interested in saving money, they have got to get on the bandwagon and start putting up their antennas to hear what is possible. Because people like you and me, I will tell anybody what's possible with open source. But I can only tell people who are ready to listen. And so that's one of the reasons you and I are making this video here. You and I, we both write articles for opensource.com. And I've done writing for other websites. I've written for PC World Magazine and Ars Technica. So I try and help get out the word because it's something I believe in. But if there are communities interested in saving money, they have got to spend a little more time finding out what is possible. And what is possible you have to go out and find it. You have to ask questions. What's possible is not going to show up on your doorstep as a neatly packaged solution. You're going to have to go find it. And if you do exert that effort, it takes effort. It's not a lot of effort. There's many people in the open source community and many librarians and teachers who are ready to answer your questions, people's questions, but seek and ye shall find. If you don't seek, you will be your choices will be more limited, and you might find yourself with vendor lock-in. Vendor lock-in is what proprietary companies, that's part of their strategy to make sure they have their hand on your wallet, either your personal wallet or your community's wallet. So, Don, did you have any other comments about how open source software brings greater liberation? So it gives you choices both in customizing the software, but it also liberates you from having to march to the drumbeat of some company far away who pretends as if they have their best interest in their hearts. Sometimes it's not always a bad thing to use. Sometimes it's not always a bad thing to use proprietary. It's not necessarily evil, but people should walk into that with eyes wide open. Did you have any further comments you wanted to share on that? Yeah.
Yeah, I about 10 years ago, when I was still a tech director, or maybe slightly longer, we had a new art teacher come to our school district, and we didn't have the money in our software budget to afford Photoshop for all the students and for all the things that she wanted to do. So I introduced her to GIMP. And at first, there was some pushback, of course. She didn't really want that. She wanted the proprietary solution. But surprisingly, after a couple or 3 years, she changed because she had students who wanted to work from home. And so it was really easy for us to provide those students with a copy of GIMP, either on a CD or a thumb drive or something. They could take it home and install it. And so then that was a conversion experience for her. And she said, it surprised me. She came up to me and she said, "What's that software again that you use? What's that? Can we get that on our computers?" And I said, "Sure, absolutely." So we re-imaged the computers with GIMP, and we made GIMP available to her students. And so GIMP, open source is about freedom, and it's about freedom to explore. It's freedom in every sense of the word. It levels the playing field, but it doesn't matter where you are. And you can run GIMP on an older laptop with almost any variety or version of Linux, and it will outperform GIMP on a proprietary on a proprietary system like a Mac or a Windows. So I think that's the big thing. It's about freedom. There's great tools, Audacity for audio files, and
Inkscape.
Inkscape. You got Inkscape. You got all, and there's all kinds of different programs out there. I remember we used Inkscape in GIMP to create T-shirts or sweatshirts with logos on them and whatever. So for other people at the school, and it's very liberating, the whole open source experience.
So it's a green solution because we can put old computers to use. Even computers I found, I get surprised with how well Linux runs on a 2002 laptop. And if you ask any computer science person, is a 2002 laptop usable today? Their standard answer would be that's obsolete. And their frame of reference is that is a fact when it's an opinion. it's obsolete from their privileged point of view. But if you are a refugee from some country, and you don't have any laptop, then a Linux laptop from 2002, that might be a dream come true. And you might even be able to get your doctorate. You might be able to get a PhD using a 20-year-old laptop. And that brings benefit not only to the individual, it brings benefit to the whole community. The person getting the PhD, they might be a scientist who is solving a health issue for the entire world. So we need to be able to have people move beyond their privileged frame of reference. I think too many of us, we don't do that work to move beyond privilege. We're all privileged, and we have to be able to have the desire to move beyond privilege, and we have to have more discussions on that, because when your frame of reference is privileged, you might not see the entire picture. And when you're not seeing the entire picture, you're sometimes limiting other people's life. If you're not looking at the entire picture, you're limiting somebody else, and that can be detrimental. So anyway, this is our conversation. I'm talking with Don Watkins. We're using Jitsi, and I'm hoping this is the first of several conversations. We love using the open source tools, and you'll probably be hearing more from us as we try out there's other software besides Jitsi. There's something called Big Blue Button that both Don and I are interested in exploring. And so until we see you next time, this is Phil Shapiro. I'm here in the Washington, D.C. area. And Don Watkins, he's up in
New York.
What's the town?
Franklinville, New York.
Franklinville, New York. It's a metropolis. It's rural Western New York, in the general vicinity of Buffalo, Rochester. So see you next time, Don.
Okay, see you, Phil. Bye.